Danke. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry not being there. I was in Finland last week, particularly doing global health, digital health standardization, and I woke up with a bad cough, and it's better to talk to you remotely. One thing can I change the slides? Yeah, I think you see different slides now. One thing that I have known is that artificial intelligence can be a strong driver for digital health technology. And so you can have lots of positive impacts if you be able to roll out the technology around the world. You can bring in automation in a diagnostic context, or you can have extend the scope of practice of medical personnel. So that was where I started looking at AI for health, and I went to a AI for Health Global Summit in May 2018 and sat in 15 excellent talks about AI for health and about the projects that they were working on. And as it turned out, all of them didn't really know what to do after they published their paper and maybe published code and data, but they didn't know what to do afterwards. And it turned out the paths from your university project or your company prototype to a product that's used out there in the world has actually been unclear at the time. So it happens that I have been around ITU standardization for quite a while, and I was sitting next to a WHO person, and we started discussing, and the idea for the focus group was born. And in 2018, and it was founded then as a joint ITU-WHO focus group. Now, I myself am an electrical engineer, as you know, and we started to basically very abstract see what's the problem of taking AI technology as it's developed in a university or in a company to the field. And so one of the things is quality assurance. You really need to know if the diagnostic tool is actually doing as good as a doctor in the field. So what we've started looking at was to see whether assessment and evaluation and monitoring how can it be specified, how can it be done. There are lots of open questions, as it turns out. And one thing, once we got ourselves deeper into looking at just quality assurance of AI solutions, it is actually a multidisciplinary approach. And it requires a lot of interaction between different groups. I'll talk about that. And then the progress is hampered by a very large lack of internationally accepted standards. There haven't been any at the time. And so at the time, it was kind of difficult to really ensure safe, effective, equitable application and actually to bring AI somewhere except for some trial and some prototype versions. Now, but nevertheless, my background has been in communication and data processing. So this is something where I've been in 2018. You see the size of the internet; it would go to 2 times 10 to the power of 21 bytes per year. And at the time there was a study, it's about 11% of total electricity that would be used to run the internet, the ICT devices, and their production. Interesting fact, just at the time, 11% of the world's electric energy was produced by nuclear using 450 power reactors. Starting this, I would like to tell you what I have been involved. So I wrote H.264, and H.265 was our next work, and these were just documents. These were standardization documents in the ITU. And together with those standardization documents, we produced reference software, and we produced methods to implement these things, these standards. And then companies took it up, and in 2003, H.264 was just a document, a Word document on my old Dell computer. And in 2018, it would be 55% of all bits on the internet would use this codec. And if you go back to the 450 nuclear power plants, that would mean roughly 230 nuclear power plants would need to be drive this codec. And so the power of scale that you see here, if done right, if you're lucky enough and you're done right, then it can be tremendous. So this is where we started out and see what we could be doing. And so we created the focus group. I am chairing the focus group, and I have 6 vice chairs. And for instance, WHO has 2 vice chairs involved, and others that you also may know. And so it seemed like maybe we're done after 2 years, have provided everything, but it's way more complicated than we thought. First of all, when you talk about AI for health, it's totally multidisciplinary. And so what we needed to get is to bring in people from, of course, medicine and AI machine learning, but also public health, government, regulation, ethics, and from different branches like academians and industry people, bring them all together and actually have them work together and have them continuously participate and contribute. And so WHO then recognized the year after digital health as a global strategy, and they supported us, and they saw that what we would be doing would very nicely fit into this strategy. And so what happened then is we looked at the different parts that WHO wanted to do here. And one of the things that we figured is what we are doing in the focus group, and I will tell you about that soon, wasn't in that strategy. Or at least was a small block, and it wasn't really clear to us where we would be fitting in. Now, what we want to do, what we started out with, was to basically, we first would start out with documenting best practices. And then we would establish standards. And then we would make open source software available, and then allow independent assets of AI solutions. And we thought that's what it would be. And we also managed to bring this in line then with that digital strategy. And it took us 16 meetings so far. So we started in Geneva, and then throughout the pandemic, we were online, but we were already online prior to the pandemic because many of the people that we worked with wouldn't be able to travel. So we basically managed to bring people in using video conferencing already prior to the pandemic. And I just returned from the meeting in Helsinki, and then the upcoming meetings will be in Douala and Cambridge, Massachusetts. And what we then also have acquired is funding. We would basically bring in people from LMICs to attend our meetings, and we have now a stable group of people that are coming, and that people is growing. So what does the focus group produce? We produce first, we started with, of course, documentation and guidelines. And we figured the medicine and the machine learning, they are 2 important parts. How do we bring them together? How do we make it work? And we figured there's so much more than that. Then we would bring in software and an assessment platform. And we would actually create AI for health audits, and we would apply those standards to basically test them. And then in a new step, we are going into implementation and scale up of that to come to this exponential curve that I was mentioning. So we started with documents. We then saw that we need open source software for all the stuff that we've been producing to be adopted and to be used worldwide. And then we are looking into global applicability and implementation of the standards. Let me start with the structure of the focus group. So we saw that there is this interaction between the medicine, between AI for health topics and about subjects that are going across those topics. And subjects that would go across those topics are dealt with in working groups. So we have a working group on ethics, on regulation, on clinical evaluation, on data and AI solution assessment, data and AI solution handling, collaboration and outreach, and everything has to be organized outside of operations. And we established reference documents and processes related to this. And as an output of these groups, we produced about 1,000+ pages of standardization and guideline so far. We published the WHO ethics experts report in the focus group. We are publishing this September the key regulatory considerations and an associated document. For instance, the regulatory document and the associated document there, these are 200 pages. And we are sending them, for instance, to IMDF, the International Medical Device Regulators Forum. We are in the finishing work of framework for clinical evaluation for AI systems in health, where you can actually have the evaluation not only on the data, but also in the clinical use. And that's supposed to come out by December 2022. And we are planning to publish the technical benchmark on the AI technology development document in March 2023. That's 2023. And we also will publish international health data sharing and federated learning in AI for health for March 2023. So with these documents, we believe that we have the base, laid out the basics for AI for health applications to be developed, to go through a regulatory check, to be ethically checked, and to be evaluated as part of their quality assurance. And the other area where we are active is we have so-called topic groups, and they are dedicated to specific use cases. We have currently 24, and what we're doing here is we look at the AI for health topics. For instance, malaria with the University of Uganda, or with tuberculosis, and also with others. I will talk about a few soon. And we basically implement those documents that came from those working groups with those topic groups and have an interaction so that both get improved the topic themselves and our working group outputs. And so what we then are working on is to bringing these together. So let me give you an example for a topic group that we are together, where the co-chairs are from the Robert Koch Institute, MIT, and Harvard University. The objective here is to have a standardized benchmarking for AI-based outbreak detection algorithms. And so you would have basically suspicious events and data streams, and you would like to know whether this is something of high emergency and how do you react to it. And this group has been very active, has been on since 3.5 years now, and it's producing these benchmarks for all sorts of outbreaks, for instance, also together. And then this group contains about 20 participants from different countries. like dengue outbreaks in Malaysia or Zika in Brazil, etc., etc. And one of the effects that this group then benefits from is the networking effect that comes through the actual work that's happening. Another example for a topic group is point of care diagnostics, where with this simple means diagnostics is being conducted, for instance, using very simple microscopes. And for instance, here you have this pathological slides where you do cervical cancer screening, and this is done by a group in from Karolinska Institute and Helsinki University with a hospital in Kenya, where they are basically bringing artificial intelligence to identify cancer cells and other cells in those slides. And we are, for instance, looking at having a clinical evaluation trial according to the clinical evaluation document with them, to also give you an idea of how big these documents become. The clinical evaluation document, one of the lead editors was Naomi Lee from the Lancet, and there were 65 people around the world involved in creating that document. So the next thing I wanted to talk about then, after the documents, is to produce software. We started with that about 2.5 years ago, when we realized that, yeah, there are documents, but we need a low barrier entry for a startup in, let's say, Nigeria, to take up the software that's developed by machine learning experts, by people also looking at the AI4 health problems, but also by regulators and also by people from the ethics group, so that they can use the software to develop their AI4 health technology. And they can basically, the software is supposed to have all the check marks, the statistical evaluation of the input data, the different training and test metrics, etc., to be built in, and produces then a documentation about your AI4 health product that you can use then, for instance, in the regulation process. And we have running prototype, quite a few people involved. It's about 45 people that are working on the software as we speak. And we are basically want to deliver the software as well by March 2023. And the next thing, one more thing that I wanted to mention is that we also look at AI4 health auditing, where we have a team of a medical person, a machine learning person, ethics and regulatory person, where we would basically be looking at a project and help them to improve their project. And as a result, they are producing documents in terms of publishing them, but also they are also improving their projects, and we are using that also to develop a guideline how you can audit your AI4 health product. We are now have started to increase our outreach, because the work I've told you before was about producing the ethical basis for producing, for creating AI4 health, the regulatory basis. I forgot to mention that the regulatory group was hosted by WHO. It contained regulators from the United States, Europe, India, and China. So we decided to create more outreach, because what we've done with our work, also the technical, the software, etc., is to enable AI4 health production in a standardized way. And we now have produced increasing outreach activities. One is to create webinars, which have been quite successful. We had like 7,000 views. Then we are organizing the national workshops, and we are now looking at scale up questions, like what are the roads and avenues to take what we have produced and as an enabling tool. Then when people develop based on that AI for health software, how to facilitate and how to implement it in a particular country. And so yeah, we think, so I have to say, my view on global health is from an engineering perspective, and I'm an engineer by heart. And I think enabling people around the world to produce technology that is helping healthcare is something that I believe is a global health catalyst. It will help us to bring healthcare to people that haven't seen it before, and or that will highly benefit from it. So what I described to you then has spurred a development where we have decided to transition the focus group into the Global Initiative on Artificial Intelligence for Health. Based on everything we have done for March 2023, we are, and this is kind of dangerous to say because it's also contingent on several supporting people. We are striving towards creating this global initiative by May 2023 to be announced at the World Health at the Geneva meeting of WHO. And we have been so far working on enabling AI for health, and we want to extend to facilitating and implement AI for health around the world. And there is a number of publications that I would like to point to where you can read about more of this work. I would also like to drag you into this world in case you want to contribute. We are meeting in December in Douala in Cameroon, or maybe at Cambridge and by the Harvard and MIT in March. And since this focus group has been very successfully and very productive, consequently afterwards, we at the Heinrich Hertz Institute decided to get involved and initiate 2 more focus groups. And I'm not going to talk about them, but want to mention them too. So we have a focus group jointly by ITU and FAO. We have a focus group jointly by ITU, World Meteorological Organization, and UNEP. This is the FAO as well, it's the next one, on AI for natural disaster management. And it's headed by Monique Kublisch from the Institute. She is a geoscientist. And this is now the ITU FAO focus group on IoT, on AI for IoT, and AI and IoT for digital agriculture. And it's also headed by Sebastian Bosse of the Heinrich Institute together with Rami Fatih from Egypt. Just want to mention them to you. So that brings me to the end of my talk. And I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing information on this new group. We wish you all the success that you can have. I think it's important for the future to get this implemented. Lots of plans. Other questions? I've got to start with one. How intimately are you involved in the development of the WHO Intelligence Hub in Berlin?
We have been in very close contact with that hub. I had like lots of talks. It seems as if they're still in the ramp-up mode. Mm-hmm. And so many PowerPoint slides, lots of talks, not so much engineering.
Okay, I mean, this is important to implement it in this particular setting, of course.
Yeah, wonderful initiative. I congratulate you. We just had a presentation by Eva Refus about health systems and their complexity. I understand that your focus is mainly on medical interventions like Papillon-Nicolau smears or microscopic artificial intelligence pattern recognition. But have you any ambition to use AI also for very complex health system interventions, like introducing health insurance into Ghana or something, where all the elements of a very complex system need to be somehow not modeled, but taken into account? Mm-hmm. So any application, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. We are contribution driven, meaning somebody would need to come to us and propose that, and then there would be a discussion whether we would feel it's in the scope of our work or not. AI for diagnosis on a medical device was something that appeared to be very clear to us as a use case. But we have also other use cases that you might find surprising. For instance, we have a use case about falsified medicine. A big percentage of medicine in Africa is falsified. It's not original or it's substandard. And it's a huge topic and it's very threatening, and how to use AI to tackle that. Also, the topic of outbreaks is an AI topic that has not to do directly with medical devices. It is looking at simulation models and how to validate them. So to my extent, if somebody comes across and says, this is a precise problem that needs solution, it's solving, and here is our idea, let's work on it, and it relates to the promotion of health, and ITU and WHO have no concerns, then we would work on it.
Thank you very much for this wide overview and your initiative. To me, if I understood you correctly, it's very much a top-down approach. So I wonder, looking at the national level here in Germany, we have, of course, many places where we have AI assessment in diagnostics. In many places, you do this imaging and AI approaches, but what we on a local basis don't have are common interfaces and the availability of the data and data interchange between even different clinics within Germany or so. Do you also include some kind of bottom-up approach to bring your top-down and the real life in different countries together?
I'm not sure what you mean by top-down or bottom-up, but I'm trying to still provide an answer, maybe. We have one of the visions that we put out very early, and I didn't put the slide, is something like an app store that WHO would be producing on digital technology. Imagine there is this cervical cancer diagnostics tool, and it's benchmarked, it's validated, it went through regulation, and now country X wants to implement that. They would want their data to be used, their own data, to be convinced that this tool is working, for example. And so what we found is it's very difficult to actually make data move from A to B when we were discussing this with multiple countries. The data actually happen to stay where they are sourced. We addressed this, of course, by providing some secure data exchange mechanisms, storage mechanisms. We are liaising with the corresponding ISO groups. But there's another way to address this, and to leave the data where it is, and then use federated learning at those locations to basically, the data never leaves the hospital, but the machine learning algorithm comes to the hospital, is executed there, which is an issue given the computing power that you need sometimes. And then the resulting model is output. And of course, you need to check that the resulting model doesn't contain clear pointers to the data it's what was used in. So, but the whole topic of health data is open, and we provide some technical support for it. But it's also a big regulatory problem that needs to be resolved, and particularly on the national basis.
Yeah, hi, this is a great talk. Thanks for the initiative. So I'm sorry not to meet you here in person. My question is more on the engineering side. So in principle, it's a very complex system. That's why there's the hope that AI will help. So how far are you? In principle, you train you train your artificial intelligence system with data, but then at some point there comes a test. You have new data and you see whether you make like predictions and how good does it work. Are you already at this stage, or is this yet to come?
We have seen a lot of results where you would have the AI and its generalization to cases, and you would have AIs making, providing a diagnostic result, and specialists, medical specialists, and you couldn't distinguish them. You can still fool the AI, you can still come up with problems to make it become really stupid. And that is where we are addressing, where we are working most to remove critical failures. But recent work on the explainable AI, also at our institute, helps us enormously to make AI robust towards data that it doesn't generalize to. So that's the big problem. You have data that are not matching to which you generalize, and having a robust reaction to those data because they are unforeseen new is something that we are addressing and we're working on. And there's quite a few new papers just coming out about that as well. But that is one thing where we are struggling. And this is what FDA, for instance, calls risk assessment, right? They don't mean how effective it is, but they mean how bad can it be? But for instance, let me give you a very practical example, and it has to do with histopathology slides. I think it was for breast cancer. We looked at the problem, and first of all, you would need to mark lymphocytes and cancer cells, and we would be able to have multiple annotators marking these things, multiple pathologists. They would all together mark the input to the algorithm. The algorithm would then learn cancer cells and lymphocytes and other tissue, and would give you, for instance, a quantitative feedback about how many cells or what's the percentage of tumor-infiltrating lymphocytes visible on these slides. And that was a new dimension, for instance, that we found that, yeah, there is tumor, that classification is done by the pathologist and by the algorithm, but the algorithm can also deliver quantitative results that before this was done by counting by hand. So as we go along, we learn that these things are actually becoming more and more useful.
Thank you very much. Are there any more questions? There's one more.
Yeah, a question is, how much are these efforts driven by industry interests and making marketable products out of that, and how much is real basic science still in this field? I mean, evidently there's a big business behind it, so it cannot be independent of business, presumably, but are we getting an open development, or are we going into a Google-type restricted version of the world?
Very good question. But I have to say that these things that we are building, we don't have industry mathematics and academic mathematics. We just have mathematics that we are looking at here. And there's also a strong interest that the algorithms, they interact with natural science, and there isn't really much of an interest-driven influence that would make sense. For instance, WHO is very careful about shielding the portions where interest can actually lead to a different result than where it doesn't matter whether somebody from companies works on this or somebody from a university. The regulatory group, for instance, it only had observers from industry, but those that wrote the regulatory documents that we are now publishing, they were from regulatory agencies only. So there was somebody from the FDA, somebody from BfArM in Germany, somebody from the Indian regulator, etc., etc. They wrote the document. The industry people had the chance to comment on it. But for instance, when you talk about regulation, there you would have influences. When you talk about how to bring together annotations from different pathologists into one annotation that you use as the reference for your machine learning algorithm, it doesn't matter whether it's industry or academia working on this. So it's, yeah, that would be my answer.
Yeah, so my question is, you said you were using machine learning, whose accuracy is probably limited compared to deep learning. So are you even using deep learning or only machine learning, is my question.
Oh, everything. It's no, everything that learns is we see as part of our scope, and it really doesn't matter to play with these terms, for me at least. Some of these things we use deep learning, like there are huge models with multiple layers and neurons. Some of them use support vector machines. Some of them even use ontologies. We have a huge group on what was it called? The way when you have an app where you say it hurts here, and then the app starts your question, and at the end it provides you with a diagnosis. And those things often use ontologies to come up with that diagnosis. At the end, we are agnostic to that aspect. The only thing what this thing needs to do is to perform well with regards to the task it is supposed to do.